Great, so we are starting. Colleagues, good afternoon. I'm not going to revisit the practicalities and instructions as per usual, but we will continue from where we have left off. We will go straight to the Amendment 23, and I call Ms. Fry from Canada to propose Amendment 23.
Hello. Thank you, Madam Chair. The amendment is a pretty simple one. We just wanted to add the following words to paragraph 22, and that is, with consideration for the unique impact of gender on whether return is safe for a particular individual. Because we well know that sometimes some people are refugees and are leaving their countries of origin because they're discriminated against, sometimes violently, sometimes with torture, sometimes in other ways, just because of their gender, or sometimes because of their sexual orientation or other things. So to ensure that before we send people back, we're not sending back to a place where there will be a continued cycle of violence against them. And so we want to make sure that before we do that, we make sure that everything is okay, that they could go back to a safe place.
Does anyone want to speak against this amendment? Mr. Farrell, your opinion?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dr. Fry. I think the additional language is certainly a benefit to the paragraph, so thank you.
I shall now put Amendment 23 to the vote, and can I again remind all of you to raise your cards, voting cards, as high as possible so that it helps for during the counting. Thank you. Who is in favor? Who is against? Abstentions? So Amendment 23, in favor 22, against 1, abstention 2, amendment is adopted. Now we will vote on paragraph 22 as amended. Anyone against? Those in favor? Abstentions? So paragraph 22 as amended, in favor 25, no one is against, 2 are abstentions, so it's agreed to. We will now vote on paragraph 23, which is unamended. So anyone against paragraph 23? Those in favor? Abstentions? Paragraph 23 is agreed to with 34 in favor, no one against, no abstentions. Now we are moving to amendments 24 and 25. Amendments 24 and 25 relate to paragraph 24. Unless there are any objections, amendment 25 has been withdrawn. I call Mr. Hudson from the United States to propose amendment 24.
I thank the chair. My second amendment gets to the implication in the text that there's been a lack of engagement by the U.S. side in trying to resolve the problem of Russian violations diplomatically. In fact, since 2013, the U.S. has engaged the Russian side on more than 30 occasions on this issue, both bilaterally and in multilateral meetings at diplomatic as well as technical levels. Moscow's response has been denial, obfuscation, and invented counter-accusation. We therefore believe that rather than calling for, quote, formally negotiating to resolve the INF dispute, end quote, the resolution's initial draft would have been on stronger ground, calling for a return to compliance with the treaty's obligations. Unfortunately, there's no indication that the Russians have any intent to do anything but let the treaty expire. I would remind our friends that all NATO nations have already agreed with the language included in this. And in this context, I would ask my dear colleagues to vote for this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Of course, I respect the sentiment that Mr. Hudson has provided. However, the reality of this statement of paragraph 24 does not in any way, shape or form refer to any lack of will on any part, and to suggest so is inaccurate. The paragraph as it currently reads asks both the United States and the Russian Federation to go back to the table and recommit to this process. I don't see how the paragraph is offensive to either state, and I believe that your amendments are somewhat waters down the sentiment in paragraph 24, and on that basis I wish to oppose it.
I shall now put amendment 24 to the vote. Those in favor of amendment 24, please raise your voting cards. Those against, please raise your cards. And abstentions? So amendment 24, 29 are in favor, 18 against, and 5 abstained. So amendment has been approved. I call Ms. Mauborgne from France to propose amendment 26.
Merci Madame la Présidente. Cet amendement vise à supprimer l'article 25 en exhortant les États à ratifier le traité de juillet 2017 sur l'interdiction des armes nucléaires ou TIAN. La France, comme d'autres pays, estime que le contexte de sécurité internationale n'est pas favorable à un tel traité. En effet, les armes nucléaires sont déjà encadrées sur le plan du droit international par de nombreux instruments de contrôle, notamment le traité de non-prolifération des armes nucléaires, le TNP. Le traité dont la ratification est prônée par cet article fragilise au contraire le système international de non-prolifération. Il cherche notamment à imposer une norme contraire au TNP puisqu'il cherche à interdire les armes des États dotés que le TNP reconnaît justement. Par ailleurs, le TIAN met en place un système de garantie inférieur à celui de l'AIEA et ne répond que partiellement les dispositions du traité d'interdiction complète des essais nucléaires, ce qui pourrait créer des difficultés d'articulation. Cet amendement et cette position ne remettent pas en cause l'engagement de la France en matière de désarmement nucléaire. Notre pays respecte en effet ses engagements dans le domaine. Il le fait en prenant compte des réalités de l'environnement de sécurité ou d'insécurité internationale. Je vous remercie.
Does anyone wish to speak against this amendment, Amendment 26? UK.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I think this section should be left in the report. I think the document we're being asked to sign is a document that no sane country could refuse to sign. Multilateral discussions have been going on for more than half a century, since before I was born, and they have failed to rid the world of weapons of mass murder. And I think it is morally dubious at best for a country which on its own holds enough weapons to wipe out mankind several times over to tell other countries, we will use these to defend ourselves, you are under no circumstances allowed to have them to defend yourselves. If the major nuclear powers want the rest of the world to live without nuclear weapons, then the major nuclear powers should start getting rid of their own nuclear weapons as well. So I would urge the Assembly to oppose this amendment and to leave that part of the report as it was originally written.
Mr. Farrell, your opinion.
Thank you, Chair. I oppose this amendment.
I shall now put Amendment 26 to the vote. Those in favor, please raise your voting cards. Those against? Any abstentions? Amendment 26, those in favor are 18, against 37, abstention 4. Amendment 26 has been defeated. We will now, therefore, vote for the original version. So, anyone against?
Original para 25.
We are voting for the original paragraph 25. Anyone against? Those in favor? Any abstentions? So paragraph 25 is agreed with 4 against, 42 in favor, and with 4 abstentions. I call Mr. Coyle from Germany to propose Amendment 27. Ms. Coyle, my apologies.
Ja, liebe Kolleginnen und Kollegen, auch diese Änderung bezieht sich auf die nukleare Abrüstung. Wir machen uns alle große Sorgen darüber, dass viele wichtige Abkommen in letzter Zeit aufgelöst worden sind. Wir erleben eine Phase der nuklearen Aufrüstung und im nächsten Jahr steht eine wichtige Überprüfungskonferenz an für den NPT, der bereits vor 5 Jahren nicht zum Erfolg geführt ist. Und es ist sehr wichtig, dass wir diesmal, also 2020, diese Überprüfungskonferenz zu einem Erfolg führen, zu einer Erklärung. Und deswegen sollte hier darauf aufmerksam gemacht werden, die Verpflichtung aus dem NPT für die Atommächte abzurüsten, ist eine sehr wichtige Verpflichtung, die wir hier mit dieser Versammlung unbedingt unterstützen sollten. Vielen Dank.
Does anyone want to speak against Amendment 27? Mr. Farrell, your opinion.
I oppose the amendment.
I'm putting Amendment 27 to the vote. Those in favor, please raise your voting cards. Those against? And abstentions, please. Amendment 27 is defeated with 26 in favor, 27 against, and 9 abstentions.
Can you announce whoever's speaking?
Dear colleagues, a quick announcement. We will be closing the speakers list for supplementary items at the end of the debate on this resolution, so that you are aware. Thank you. I call Ms. Coyle again from Germany to propose Amendment 28.
Ja, vielen Dank. Mit diesem Änderungsantrag, da geht es darum, die Verhandlungen über die Ächtung von vollautomatischen Waffensystemen zu unterstützen. Derzeit finden Gespräche ja in Genf statt im Rahmen der UNO, um im Vornherein zu verhindern, dass wir erneut Waffensysteme entwickeln, die wir nachher möglicherweise nicht mehr kontrollieren können. Schwierig wird an diesen Waffen vor allen Dingen, dass es keine menschlichen Verantwortlichen mehr am Ende gibt für die Entscheidung, die diese Waffen nachher autonom treffen werden. Und deswegen soll mit diesem Änderungsantrag auf die Verhandlungen in Genf hingewiesen werden. Und es wäre sehr gut, wenn diese Versammlung diese Verhandlungen unterstützen würde. Vielen Dank.
Does anyone want to speak against this amendment, Amendment 28? Mr. Farrell, your opinion.
Thank you, Chair. I support the amendment.
I'm putting Amendment 28 to the vote. Please raise your cards, those in favor. Those against this amendment? Abstentions? Amendment 28 is approved with 46 in favor, 16 against, and 3 abstained. We will now take paragraphs 26 to 29, which are all unamended together. Does anyone want a separate vote on any of these paragraphs? Anyone against? So we are grouping these paragraphs. Is anyone against that? No one. Those in favor? Against? Abstention, sorry. So paragraphs 26 to 29 have been approved with 53 in favor, no one against, 1 abstention. We're moving to amendments 29, 30, and 31. Amendments 29, 30, and 31 relate to paragraph 30 and returning and relocating terrorist fighters. I will therefore group the amendments together for discussion as allowed for under Rule 22 of the Rules of Procedure. Once the amendments have been discussed, I will put them to a vote. Please note that if Amendment 29 is agreed to, Amendment 30 will be preempted and will not be put to a vote. If Amendment 30 is agreed to, Amendment 31 will be preempted and will not be put to a vote. I call Mr. Arslan from Turkey to propose Amendment 29.
Dear Madam Chair, we would like to amend a paragraph because the return of FTFs has turned out to be a completed and significant agenda item for all relevant international platforms, as well as source and transit countries. The issue has both human and security aspects. From a security perspective, those FTFs who are not be subject to judicial and rehabilitation processes would constitute important security risk worldwide. From a human perspective, children in particular and other family members who are in need of social and rehabilitation services should not be deprived of them. In this sense, FTFs or their children should be best provided with such services in the countries of which they belong. Also, security arrangements and necessary judicial procedures could be best put into practice in their home countries. This point is particularly important in the fight against terrorism and security risks associated with FTFs. Thank you very much, dear Madam Chair.
Does anyone want to speak against this amendment? Norway, please.
Yes, thank you. On behalf of the Norwegian delegation, we cannot recommend this amendment. One thing is that we want to facilitate the return of the children, and completely another thing is to actively facilitate the return of adult male foreign terrorist fighters. This is not a wise policy. We did not actively facilitate them to go as foreign terrorist fighters. I think this will be a completely wrong message to send, that we will spend our time, our money, our resources to actively help adult males back to European continent and to other places in the world. And I would like to remind you that since the so-called caliphate in 2013, all the European attacks related back to the so-called caliphate, at least all attacks are linked back to at least one foreign terrorist fighter. So actively working to get them back to Europe, that will not be a wise policy. So I will recommend to not vote for this amendment.
I call Mr. Jabarov from the Russian Federation to propose Amendment 30.
Спасибо, господин председатель, госпожа председатель. Мы предлагаем изменения в пункт 30 проекта, дополняя его в соответствии с резолюцией Совета Безопасности ООН номер 2396 от 2017 года, касающиеся противодействия главных приоритетов сферы международного сотрудничества по противодействию иностранным террористам-боевикам. То есть мы предлагаем добавить указание на необходимость противодействия распространению террористической и экстремистской идеологии и полного соблюдения международных обязательств о создании систем предварительной информации о пассажирах, соблюдении норм внутреннего законодательства и применимых норм международного права, включая международное право в области прав человека. Спасибо.
Does anyone wish to speak against the United States, Mr. Hudson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As the Vice Chair of our Ad Hoc Committee on Countering Terrorism, I have some grave concerns about this amendment. First of all, it calls for eliminating civil society, education, specialized social services to counter violent extremism, which I believe is what we need to deal with the root causes of violent extremism. Secondly, it eliminates the language referencing the United Nations Security Council resolutions and also runs counter to our own counterterrorism report, which will be introduced, I believe, tomorrow. Third, we have to be very careful about overly broad definition of the term extremism. We only have to look at the treatment of Jehovah's Witnesses in Russia or other inconvenient people. And finally, I would say that developing a watch list of terrorists, our friends from Russia would have a lot more credibility in calling for such an item if they weren't already using Interpol to target their political enemies. So I have some grave concerns about what they've eliminated and grave concerns about what they've included. Thank you.
I now call Ms. Fry from Canada to propose Amendment 31.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the whole issue of foreign fighters and terrorists has become more and more complex. And what we've been seeing is there's a rise in the number of women who have participated themselves as foreign terrorists, who have gone to other countries, etc. But we also know that there are families of these terrorists who themselves may or may not have been victims of terrorism. So it's not as simple as it sounds. There needs to be some sort of way, and my amendment proposes that we need to develop gender and age-sensitive responses, mainly because of the children of some of those families, and also because of the fact that some family members may themselves have been victims of terrorism. So it shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all. There should be a bit of tunneling down to find out how these families are impacted, especially and including specifically looking at how women who play roles of terrorists got there and how we need to look at strategies for working with them. Thank you.
Does anyone wish to speak against this amendment? Mr. Farrell, your opinion of these amendments?
Thank you, Chair. I oppose Amendment 29. I oppose Amendment 30, and I do not oppose Amendment 31.
I shall now put Amendment 29 to the vote. Those in favor, please raise your voting cards. Those against? And abstentions. Amendment 29 is defeated with 13 in favor, 45 against, and 7 abstentions. I shall now proceed to a vote on Amendment 30. Will all those in favor of Amendment 30 please raise...
Madam Chair, a parliamentary inquiry from the United States. Roger
yes.
Wick with the United States. Just so we understand, we are now in a position where Amendment 30 is the question. If it is adopted, what will be the status of Amendment 31?
If Amendment 30 is adopted, then 39, Amendment 31 will be preempted.
I see. Thank you for the parliamentary explanation, ma'am.
So to continue, those in favor of Amendment 30, please raise your voting cards. Those against? And abstentions? So Amendment 30 is defeated with 4 in favor, 55 against, and 2 abstention. I shall now proceed to a vote on Amendment 31. Will all those in favor of Amendment 31 please raise your voting cards? It was in favor, right? Yeah. Against? And abstentions? So Amendment 31 is adopted with 47 in favor, 7 against, and 8 abstentions. We will now vote on paragraph 31. Anyone against? As amended. Yeah. 30 as amended. My apologies. We will now vote on paragraph 30 as amended. Anyone against? In favor? Abstentions? Paragraph 30 is approved with 40 in favor, 4 against, 4 abstentions, and no one against. Now we will vote on paragraph 31, unamended. Anyone against? Those in favor? Abstentions? Paragraph 31 is approved with 53 in favor, no one against, no abstentions. So that concludes the consideration of amendments. Thank you very much. I propose that we now formally move to a vote on the draft resolution as amended. Would those in favor of adopting the draft resolution as amended please raise their voting cards? Those against? Are there any abstentions to the resolution, to the draft resolution? So the draft resolution is adopted with 66 in favor, 3 against, and 2 abstentions. Thank you very much. And now, floor to Mr. Farrell.
Thank you very much, Chair. It leaves for me to just say thank you. As I said at the beginning, to thank Gustavo Pérez and the staff of the OSCE for their assistance, indeed the Chair for her dutiful work over the last 2 days. Lest I do not have an opportunity to thank our hosts in Luxembourg who have provided wonderful facilities, and I'd like to sincerely thank you on behalf of the Irish delegation for your hospitality. And finally, I'd like to thank all of you, the members of this Assembly, for your contribution to this resolution, which I think has been improved by a number of the amendments that have been put and accepted by all of you. And I wish to put on the record my thanks and appreciation for your interest and contributions over the last 2 days. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Farrell. Now we are moving to the consideration of the first supplementary item, which is the militarization by the Russian Federation of the temporarily occupied Autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol, Ukraine, the Black Sea, and the Sea of Azov. We now move, there are no amendments to this item. I give the floor to Mr. Gerasimov from Ukraine, who is the sponsor of this draft resolution, and Mr. Gerasimov will have 5 minutes for his speech. In terms of the debate, after the speech, we will open the floor for debates, and each speaker will have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dear Madam Chairperson, dear members of the Assembly, distinguished colleagues. It's the 5th consecutive year now that the Russian Federation has been waging undeclared war against Ukraine. In 2018, Russian aggression has considerably expanded to cover the Sea of Azov and the Kerch Strait, in addition to the ongoing militarization of the occupied Crimean Peninsula. By this draft resolution, we draw attention to these most serious threats to security and stability present in the OSCE area. Let me provide you with some facts. Since April 2018, hundreds of vessels bound to the Ukrainian ports of Mariupol and Berdyansk were stopped by Russian border guards. Ukrainian ports incurred huge losses caused by Russia-imposed systematic disruptions of freedom of international navigation, including due to illegal construction and opening of a bridge across the Kerch Strait. The number of Russian military vessels has been continuously growing in the Azov Sea. The Russian Federation stepped up military escalation and intends to enhance its naval component in the area. In the occupied Crimea, compared to the pre-occupation period, Russia has nearly tripled its military personnel, substantially reinforced and modernized its military, land, air, and naval components. It has stationed dozens of tank and anti-aircraft systems which were not present on the peninsula, increased up to 6-7 times the number of combat vehicles, artillery systems, combat aircrafts, more than doubled the amount of combat helicopters, combat ships and submarines. Particularly dangerous are Russia's actions which could lead to the re-nuclearization of Crimea. On November 25, 2018, all these activities culminated in a blatant act of armed aggression against Ukraine when the Russian servicemen opened fire at Ukrainian ships and targeted Ukrainian sailors. 3 Ukrainian ships were seized, 24 Ukrainian servicemen were captured, 3 of them wounded. Until now, they remained in captivity of the Kremlin regime as prisoners of war. These actions of the aggressor state constitute a blatant breach of the purposes and principles enriched in the United Nations Charter and the Helsinki Final Act, as well as provisions of the UN Convention of the Law of the Sea. We cannot leave such actions without a proper response by the OSCE EPA. On May 25 this year, the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea issued an order which prescribed provisional measures ordering the Russian Federation to immediately release 3 Ukrainian naval vessels and 24 Ukrainian servicemen, unlawfully seized by Russia near the Kerch Strait in November 2018. This order sends a strong message to Russia that it cannot violate international law with impunity. The Ukrainian side now expects Russia to release all the crew members and return their vessels unconditionally and without delay. By this draft resolution, signed by 35 MPs from 13 countries, we call on you to reaffirm full respect for the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine within its internationally recognized borders, condemn Russia's aggressive behavior, and encourage the OSCE chairmanship, OSCE institutions, and the participating states to use all relevant OSCE instruments, in particular the Special Monitoring Mission. Special attention is paid to the urgency of release of Ukrainian prisoners of war and their protection under applicable international humanitarian law, including the Geneva Conventions. We call upon your support. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. And the first speaker on our list is Mr. Whittingdale from the United Kingdom, and the next speaker will be Mr. Harris from the United States.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I speak in support of this supplementary item as a representative of the United Kingdom, which was one of the original signatories of the Budapest Memorandum in 1994. That memorandum, to give it its full title, was on the security assurances in connection with Ukraine's accession to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons, and it guaranteed that the signatories would respect the territorial integrity of Ukraine. The annexation of Crimea by Russia is a flagrant violation of the Budapest Memorandum by one of its own signatories. It also has been condemned by the OSCE and by the United Nations. As has already been said, since that time there has been a steady military build-up, including storage of nuclear ammunition in Crimea, as well as the deployment of nuclear-capable cruisers and bombers. At the same time, the indigenous population, the Crimean Tatars, have suffered deportation and persecution. Not that long ago, I met Eleonora Bekirov, the daughter of Edem Bekirov. He is a disabled Crimean Tatar. He was arrested in December 2018. He was deprived of food and water, and he is being held without proper medical treatment. And I call upon the Russian Federation to release him and all the other Tatars who have been wrongly imprisoned. At the same time, I would like to strongly support the words of the resolution in relation to the Sea of Azov. Just before Christmas, I traveled to Berdyansk and to Mariupol to see the effect upon those two ports of the blockade which is taking place of the Kerch Strait. The building of the bridge by the Russian Federation prevented large ships moving into the Sea of Azov, and since then there has now been impediment of passage for all ships, so that they have to wait for weeks before being allowed access. The effect of that is to essentially starve those two ports. I went to see the port facilities, which are standing largely empty because ships can no longer properly travel to and from. At the same time, I saw the steelworks in Mariupol, which is unable to obtain its raw materials from occupied territories in the east of Ukraine and is unable to export its product because of the economic warfare. And finally, I absolutely echo the comments of the Ukrainian delegation leader about the 24 sailors who are being held illegally by the Russian Federation. That has been condemned by the International Tribunal for the Law of the Sea and is in clear breach of the Geneva Convention. And therefore, I would urge the support for this supplementary item.
Mr. Harris from the United States, followed by Mr. Chubaru from Ukraine.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Our delegation strongly supports this supplemental item focusing on the tragic war in Ukraine, which now stretches into its 5th senseless year and is expanding. This war has claimed more than 13,000 lives and left a dire humanitarian situation in its wake, displacing millions of people, most of them now living in other parts of Ukraine. The illegal occupation of Crimea also continues, an occupation under which the human rights of those who reside on this sovereign Ukrainian territory are systematically violated. This aggression has been condemned by this Assembly on a number of occasions as clear, gross, and uncorrected violations of the Helsinki Principles by the Russian government. But now, in addition to the ongoing issue of Crimea and eastern Ukraine, the latest infraction occurred on November 25th when Russian forces rammed, fired upon, and seized Ukrainian vessels near the Kerch Strait. These sailors and ships must be released. Impeding the transit of Ukrainian vessels through this body of water is a flagrant violation of international maritime law. Russia must cease obstructing, delaying, and harassing the transit of vessels in the strait bound for Ukrainian ports and release the seized 24 Ukrainian sailors and 3 vessels. This supplementary item calls on the Kremlin to also withdraw all political, military, and financial support for its proxies in eastern Ukraine and restore Ukrainian control over its internationally recognized borders, including its territorial waters. Our American delegation stands unanimous and shoulder to shoulder with the vast majority of this Assembly in support of Ukraine's sovereignty, independence, and territorial integrity. We do not, nor will we ever, recognize Russia's illegal annexation of Crimea, as we are also signatories of the Budapest Memorandum. The sanctions we have imposed on Russia will remain in place until the Ukraine's territorial integrity is fully restored. Finally, I would also like to take this opportunity to once again thank the courageous OSCE monitors who serve as the eyes and ears of the world in this conflict zone, relaying the tragedy of this conflict every day under often very difficult conditions. We appreciate the extremely valuable work they do, and the Russian government and its proxies must cease hindering the monitors' ability to fulfill their mandate. This includes granting the monitoring mission access to Crimea, where it would undoubtedly reinforce reports we receive about the appalling humanitarian tragedy unfolding under the Russian occupation. I urge support of the supplementary item.
Our next speaker is Mr. Chubarov from Ukraine, followed by a Russian speaker from the Russian Federation.
Уважаемая госпожа председатель, уважаемые коллеги, наша резолюция тематическая. Речь идет о милитаризации Российской Федерации государством-оккупантом временно оккупированных Автономной Республики Крым и города Севастополя, Черного и Азовского морей. Мы говорим о милитаризации России временно оккупированного Крыма, поскольку именно эта деятельность призвана, по мнению российских оккупантов, закрепить результаты незаконной аннексии Крыма и прилегающих к полуострову вод и шельфа. Сегодня очевидно для всех, Россия усиленно превращает оккупированный ею Крым в военный плацдарм, опираясь на который она рассчитывает осуществлять дальнейшую политическую, военную и экономическую экспансию не только против своих ближних соседей, но и во всем Черноморско-Средиземноморском регионе. Уже сейчас военные корабли Черноморского флота России из Севастополя направляются с оружием и войсками в Сирию. Россия поставила своей целью превратить Черное и Азовское моря во внутренние российские водоемы. Усиленная милитаризация Крыма побуждает Россию осуществлять репрессии и гонения против мирного населения Крыма, нелояльного к российским оккупантам, прежде всего против крымско-татарского народа и этнических украинцев. Я уже говорил в своем предыдущем выступлении вчера о целенаправленном вытеснении коренного народа Крыма, крымских татар, и искусственном заселении оккупированной украинской территории гражданами России. Более 100 крымских политзаключенных, сотни несовершеннолетних детей, оставшиеся без своих отцов, которых лишили незаконно свободы, десятки тысяч вынужденных переселенцев, десятки насильственно похищенных и убитых молодых людей, катастрофические разрушения исторических и культурных памятников крымско-татарского народа. Уважаемые коллеги, разумеется, делегация Российской Федерации будет сейчас выступать против подобной резолюции. Мы же со своей стороны не просто вас призываем поддержать эту резолюцию, но единственным выходом, который может заставить Россию возвратиться в рамки международного права, единственным выходом, позволяющим деоккупировать захваченные Российской Федерацией украинские территории, мы видим усиление санкций, вплоть до полной изоляции России и введение эмбарго на российские энергоносители, прежде всего на российский газ и нефть. Благодарю вас за внимание.
The next speaker is Mr. Rizhak from the Russian Federation, followed by Mr. Vok from Ukraine.
Уважаемые коллеги, вот мы сейчас прослушали зачитанное по бумажке патетическое выступление человека, который возглавлял кампанию по изоляции своего народа, крымско-татарского народа, когда взрывал линии электропередач. Все эти картинки мы видели по своим телевизорам, когда он давал интервью и хвастался. Я думаю, что вот нагромождение фактов, когда даже сейчас новый начальник генерального штаба украинской армии признал, что инцидент в Керченском заливе это была провокация украинского государства. Украина признала этот факт. А мы сейчас слушаем вот эти басни. Впервые крымско-татарский народ получил право называть свой язык государственным языком, а нам говорят о каких-то притеснениях, о гонениях. Я думаю, что вот и дальше, если мы будем следовать вот этой логике, очень далеко мы пойдем и никогда не решим вот этот узел. Ложные посылки об аннексии, временной оккупации, милитаризации ничего не имеют общего и ничего не имеют с реальной действительностью. Я должен вам сказать и другой факт. Вот этот мост дружбы, мост жизни, который впервые позволил народу Крыма прорвать экономическую блокаду, обеспечить приток туристов, обеспечить связь людей, времен и народов на этом многострадальном сейчас участке земли. А его называют наши американские коллеги, что это неправильная постановка вопроса, неправильное решение, вместо того, чтобы поддержать вот это решение. Я думаю, что и моряки, мы же вышли с инициативами возвратить моряков без всякого судебного преследования. Но Климкин, министр иностранных дел, все сделал для того, чтобы не поставить в известность по данной инициативе нового президента Зеленского. Это же сам Зеленский заявил. То есть новая команда делает все для того, чтобы власть, которая пришла сейчас, изменившаяся власть, ничего не сделала для нормализации ситуации на Украине. Кто-то очень заинтересован, чтобы поленья войны разгорались и чтобы братоубийственная война, как Коломойский заявил недавно, это действительно внутренний конфликт самой Украины. Попрошу еще раз подумать всем тем, кто будет принимать вот эту провокационную в корне резолюцию. Благодарю за внимание.
The next speaker is Mr. Vovk from Ukraine, followed by Mr. Onyshenko from the Russian Federation.
Madam Chair, dear colleagues, as we debate the issue of the militarization by Russia of the temporarily occupied Crimea, I would like to ask you one simple question. Dear colleagues, do you think that we would have to discuss this issue if Ukraine had retained its nuclear weapons? You all know well enough that there would be no Russian military aggression if Ukraine had not surrendered its nuclear arms 25 years ago. When the Soviet Union collapsed, Ukraine inherited the world's third largest nuclear arsenal, including some 2,000 strategic nuclear warheads. That was 2.5 times larger than the nuclear arsenal of the UK, France, and China combined. Being aware of the existential Russian threat, Ukraine agreed to give up these nuclear arms only in exchange for international guarantees of its security and territorial integrity from major nuclear powers. In 1994, the Budapest Memorandum on Security Assurances in connection with Ukraine's accession to the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Arms was signed. Ukraine made an unprecedented historic contribution to the global nuclear disarmament and decreasing the threat of nuclear war. Russia's aggression against Ukraine has been in blatant violation of Russia's obligations under both the Budapest Memorandum and the Helsinki Final Act of the OSCE. Naturally, Ukrainian people feel cheated and betrayed. Besides, Russia's aggression undermines the entire global nuclear non-proliferation regime and prompts other states to view nuclear weapons as a legitimate way of deterrence against aggression. What signal does it send to Iran, North Korea, and others? Moreover, if the international community does not stand firmly by the Budapest Memorandum, we may see the rise of political forces in Ukraine who already call to restore Ukraine's legal right for nuclear weapons as a measure of last resort to deter Russian aggressor. We all hope this will not happen. And finally, we call on this assembly not to follow the bad example of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe, which has recently chosen the shameful path of appeasement of aggressor. The recent submission by PACE to Kremlin's demands will only encourage its aggressiveness and will surely cost the authority of the Council of Europe and may even threaten its very existence. As without its authority, Council of Europe may become irrelevant and obsolete. We believe that this organization, OSCE, will not follow suit, and by contrast to the Council of Europe, will not raise questions about its future. We call upon you to support our resolution on Crimea. Thank you.
The next speaker is Mr. Onyshenko from the Russian Federation, followed by Mr. Vysotsky from Ukraine.
Спасибо, госпожа председательствующая. В представленном проекте резолюции, содержащей квази-военизированную терминологию, единственным, что представляет для себя интерес, это ссылка в 3-м пункте на резолюцию Генеральной Ассамблеи о положении в области человека, именно защиты прав человека. Я единственный в этом зале, кто был в Донбассе буквально в это время, неделю назад, в субботу. Я там был в медицинском университете. 600 выпускников этого института получили дипломы, которые сертифицированы в российской системе. образовательные, теперь они имеют право не получать квазидипломы, а иметь с вполне признаваемым международным сообществом дипломы. Также в строительном институте было. Я встречался с министром здравоохранения, встречался с министром образования и науки и обсуждал все вопросы, связанные с правительством, нынешним правительством ДНР. Конечно же, вопросы милитаризации там действительно есть. Это то, что сегодня армия Украины прямой наводкой тяжелой артиллерии стреляет по Киевскому, Пролетарскому району города Донецка, а у боевиков, по-другому их нельзя назвать, есть такая забава детская, когда они стреляют по детям и соревнуются, кто больше отстреляет детей. Как раз именно в период моего нахождения в городе Донецке была вот та активизация прямой стрельбы по мирным домам, по мирным учреждениям и так далее. Это, конечно же, не может нас не беспокоить, и поэтому я думаю, что мы действительно должны обсуждать вопросы военных действий на территории Украины, на территории Донбасса и на территории Крыма. Что же касается Крыма, то когда Крым перешел в состав Российской Федерации, мы остановили там уже проектирующиеся странами НАТО военно-биологические объекты, в частности, на базе Симферопольской противочумной станции уже был готов проект для того, чтобы оружие массового уничтожения в виде биологического оружия разместить на территории Крыма. Так что это тоже нужно учитывать в рамках нашего сегодняшнего обсуждения. Что касается угрозы Украины сегодня для Европы и для России, я об этом говорил на прошлой сессии и считаю нужным повторить. Сегодня действительно угроза от Украины исходит в результате безответственной политики прошлого правительства. Я не могу дать оценку нынешнему правительству, поскольку ему не дают работать, в том числе и депутаты, сидящие в этом зале, которые, я как понимаю, уже сегодня не являются депутатами, они распущенный парламент. Так вот, эта угроза исходит из того, что не прививаются против Крыма, против Кори населения. Госпожа...
Time is up. Sorry. Apologies. From Ukraine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, colleagues. First of all, I would like to react on the words that we heard from our Russian colleagues. Well, Russia remains the country of the fake news and fake propaganda. I saw the interview of the new head Chief of Staff of Ukraine, Mr. Khamchak, when he commented the aggressive act of war of Russia on the Sea of Azov and attack on Ukrainian ships and detaining and capturing 24 sailors. Well, he in fact said the opposite, that Russia is fully responsible for the act of violence and act of war. Why our resolution is important? You all know that the freedom of the seas and the freedom of navigation is one of the basic international principles that we have now acting in the world. We understand then when our sailors and our ships were attacked not only in Ukrainian Ukrainian seas, but were followed by the Russian military to international seas, we saw in fact the act of piracy from the Russian Federation. How far this act of piracy and this kind of aggression could reach if we will not condemn and stop Russia from these kind of acts? Will they act by the military ships in the whole Black Sea, considering it's some kind of sea of international, Russian influence? Will they act as so in maybe some NATO bases that we have in the Mediterranean Sea and in the countries of Balkans, where this right and rule of power from Russia could be stopped, in fact? We don't know. Second thing is the freedom of the skies. Why not one of the basic principles of international communities? As you know, 2 weeks ago, the joint investigation concluded that Russia is responsible for the downing of MH17 flight when 280 98 souls were perished. International investigation concluded that the Buk missile that was generated from Russia were used by the Russian military and the Russian citizens to down this plane. If Russia will militarize Crimea, and now they are placing the newest types of anti-aircraft weaponry in Crimea, C-400 complexes and missiles, we will see in some years or some months the situation when the freedom of the skies and when the flights come across the Crimea Peninsula could be, in danger because of these acts of militarization. So please, I ask you to vote in favor.
Thank you, Mr. Vysotsky. The next speaker on the list is Mr. Slutsky from the Russian Federation, followed by Ms. Ostrikova from Ukraine.
Спасибо, госпожа председатель. Дорогие коллеги, я, в отличие от наших коллег из Украины, знаю, как мы могли бы преодолеть те противоречия, которые являются уже застарелыми и окаменелыми стереотипами на площадке нашей ассамблеи. Мы непрерывно пикируемся противоположными позициями, которые, как говорят математики, не приводятся к общему знаменателю. При этом позиция, с которой выступают бывшие члены Верховной Рады, которые, видимо, последний раз находятся здесь, на площадке парламентской ассамблеи от имени Украины, этот подход не разделяется самими гражданами Украины, которые большинством проголосовали против Петра Алексеевича Порошенко, который исповедовал именно эти антироссийские заведомо подходы. Что касается двух регионов юго-востока Украины, нам еще раз подчеркну, следует читать доклад смешанной рабочей группы, смешанной мониторинговой группы по данному региону, которая нам в 8 докладах дала четкое определение того, что тяжелых вооружений, происходящих из России, там не было. И каждый раз, когда мы выполняли главное условие Минских соглашений, разведение тяжелых вооружений, это условие не выполнялось, к сожалению, именно украинской стороной. Именно со стороны Украины, как справедливо отметил мой коллега Онищенко, продолжают лететь снаряды с надписями «Детям Донбасса». Снаряды с надписями «Детям Донбасса» летят в цивилизованной Европе в 21 столетии, и именно это должно быть предметом рассмотрения нашей организации. Для того, чтобы нам прийти к единой позиции, необходимо прислушиваться к докладам смешанной мониторинговой миссии, надо приезжать, мы приглашаем всех в Россию, дабы переговорить по существу, дабы посмотреть ситуацию на месте, переговорить с экспертами, никаких проблем. Мы именно для этого находимся здесь, в Ассамблее. Пора перестать заниматься пустопорожними пикировками. И что касается моряков в заключение. Эти моряки грубейшим образом нарушили территориальные воды Российской Федерации, государственную границу России. Поэтому их судьбу решит суд в соответствии с законодательством Российской Федерации, и не следует сотрясать воздух на разного рода международных площадках, когда в этом, как вы знаете, коллеги, нет никакого смысла. Я призываю нашу организацию вернуться к первоначальному своему значению организации по безопасности и сотрудничеству в Европе. Следует перестать обмениваться заведомо противоположными обвинениями. На самом деле истина лежит в документах, в том числе и в Минских соглашениях, сторонами которых являются Киев и 2 региона юго-востока Украины. А в невыполнении этих соглашений обвиняют Россию, которая не может здесь что-либо выполнять или не выполнять. Большое спасибо. Я закончил и надеюсь на конструктив в нашей дальнейшей работе. Спасибо.
The next speaker is Ms. Ostrikova from Ukraine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the course of 5 years of illegal occupation of Crimea, the Russian Federation and its proxies have committed gross violations of human rights and fundamental freedoms of the local population. The violations have been registered and documented by the United Nations and the OSCE, ODIHR, HSNM missions, civil society organizations, and human rights defenders. From day one of the illegal occupation, Russia has been transforming the Crimean Peninsula into the human rights exclusion zone marked by injustice, terror, and repression. In occupied Crimea, which constitutes an integral part of the sovereign territory of my country within its internationally recognized borders, Russia attempts to erase the national identity of the Ukrainians and of the indigenous people of the peninsula, the Crimean Tatars, by cruel silences of any dissenting voices. Ukraine strongly condemned these actions of the Russian Federation that violated Ukrainian legislation and the fundamental norms and principles of international law, including the United Nations Charter, the Helsinki Final Act of 1975, the UN General Assembly Resolution on Territorial Integrity of Ukraine, UN General Assembly Resolutions of 2016, 17, and 18 on the situation of human rights in the Autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol, 1994 Budapest Memorandum, as well as numerous international agreements to which Russia is a party. We are deeply concerned with the growing repressions, gross violations of human rights, discrimination of the Crimean Tatars and ethnic Ukrainians in the occupied Crimea. As a result of the Russian aggressive policy against Ukraine, around 100 Ukrainians are detained under the politically motivated charges in Russia and the occupied Crimea. At least 120 people are held captive in the occupied Donbas. The pressure on the Crimean Tatars in the occupied Crimea by Russia increases daily. At the end of March, as a result of mass searches in the Crimea, 23 Crimean Tatars were detained and smuggled to the territory of the Russian Federation. All of them are accused of fabricated charges in terrorist activity. On 30th May, 2 Crimean Tatar women activists were simultaneously arrested and detained under trumped-up accusation in propaganda of prohibited organizations in Russia. Each of them has 4 small children. And one comment on Russian thoughts. Let Ukrainian people decide by themselves for whom they vote and whom they elect as a president. It's our internal issue. But our country has made up a choice for European and Euro-Atlantic direction and vector of our development. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Let me remind you, the speakers list is over. Let me remind you that there are no amendments to paragraph 1 to 20 of the supplementary item, meaning that there are no amendments to the entire supplementary item. So we are proposing to take them together. Does anyone want a separate vote on either of these paragraphs? Which means that I propose that we now formally move to a vote on the draft resolution. Would those in favor of adopting the draft resolution please raise their voting cards? Those in favor. Those who are against? Abstentions? So the resolution is adopted with 54 in favor, 6 against, and 6 abstentions. So now we are moving to consideration of the second supplementary item, referred to as by the Standing Committee, the challenges related to returning and relocating foreign terrorist fighters, which is supplementary item number 6. There are 5 amendments to this item. I give floor to Ms. Lisa Chambers, who will present the supplementary item instead of Mr. Voridis, who is not present right now. Miss Lisa, you've got the floor, 5 minutes. And I would like to ask the speakers if you could keep your speeches to 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the opportunity to propose this SI. Our supplementary item today is a draft resolution on the challenges related to returning and relocating foreign terrorist fighters. Today I am standing in for our chairman, Makis Ridis, as he cannot be with us today, and it is my pleasure to present this to you on behalf of the Ad Hoc Committee on Countering Terrorism. As a result of the increasing threat that returning foreign terrorist fighters pose to international peace and security, the UN Security Council has adopted several resolutions requiring member states to implement measures to effectively prevent, deter, and criminalise the travel of foreign terrorist fighters and their related activities. To note, Resolution 2178 defines foreign terrorist fighters as individuals who travel to a state other than their states of residence or nationality for the purpose of the interpretation, planning, and preparation of, or participation in, terrorist acts or the providing or receiving of terrorist training, including in connection with armed conflict. Building on UN Security Council resolutions 2178 on states affected by foreign terrorist fighters and 2396 on threats to international peace and security caused by terrorist acts, the draft resolution on the challenges related to the returning and relocating foreign terrorist fighters thus offers an original policy framework to effectively respond to such challenges in the OSCE region in compliance with the UN requirements. The draft resolution encompasses measures on border control, information sharing, law enforcement cooperation, prosecution, rehabilitation, and reintegration of foreign terrorist fighters and their accompanying family members. Moreover, this supplementary item urges participating states to enhance partnerships with the OSCE governmental structures and other key partners, particularly the UN and its agencies. At its core, this draft calls on states to build and enhance national capacities to prevent the movement of terrorists through effective border control measures, with measures such as the establishment of API systems and the collection of PNR data in compliance with international standards, as well as to advance national legal frameworks and domestic legislation to effectively persecute terrorists. In the context of cooperation, the draft resolution addresses the need to share information and to make full use of international law enforcement mechanisms and means for judicial cooperation, and encourages states to build solid partnerships amongst each other. Relevant organisations and actors to successfully coordinate efforts to combat terrorism on national, regional and international levels. Notably, the content of this document builds on previous efforts by the OSCE PA Ad Hoc Committee on Countering Terrorism, including the 2018 resolution on preventing and countering terrorism and violent extremism and radicalisation that lead to terrorism, as well as more recent CCT activities, such as the informal visit conducted to Paris and France in February 2019, and our recently launched parliamentary initiative on border security and information sharing. In Paris, we explored the complex security, legal, social and ethical dilemmas stemming from the return of minors from conflict-affected areas. Through our border control and information sharing initiative, we prompted national parliaments to push for the full implementation of relevant international standards in the context of countering terrorism and violent extremism. Many of the findings of these efforts are clearly reflected in the proposed measures within the draft resolution. Finally, it should be noted with regard to the OSCE failed to reach consensus on this very topic during its last ministerial meeting in Milan. I hope that we as parliamentarians can again make a difference and adopt this document unanimously. This would send a crystal clear signal to the international community regarding our resoluteness in this field. I want to again, Chairperson, bring to the attention of members that this is a cross-dimensional resolution and it should have been taken at plenary session. So as not to set a precedent, I want to inform members that it was taken at the first committee purely for logistical reasons. I want to take also the opportunity to compliment and to thank Marco Bonabello, all of his team at the Secretariat, and all of the members of the Committee on Countering Terrorism for their efforts on this committee over the last 2 years. And also, of course, to commend our chair, Makis Varidis, for his tireless work in representing the PA and the committee across many countries and many visits. Thank you in advance for your support, and I am happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you. The first speaker, we will open the debate now. We will not have time for all speakers because we have to finish in about 10 minutes. The first speaker, and we will continue tomorrow. The first speaker on the list is Mr. Azopardi from Malta.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Research shows that historically, relatively few returning foreign terrorists pose a direct threat to their home country. However, those who did pose a threat were responsible for some of the most lethal terrorist attacks of the past 3 decades. Following the return, some foreign terrorist fighters have continued to play a critical role in creating and strengthening terrorist groups and radicalization and recruiting terrorist networks. I will not go into whether or not our nations should accept the return of FTFs. However, if we do accept the return, we must recall that returning foreign terrorist fighters are not a homogeneous group. They are diverse in terms of age and gender, in the role that they have played within the terrorist network and in the experience that they have had in conflict zones. These differences pose profound and complex challenges when working towards successful return and reintegration. This diversity requires a nuanced approach to supporting returning terrorist fighters and their families, which support must be recognizant of the reasons which led to their original country, to their origin decision to join a terrorist group and their decision to leave their home country to fight. It must also take into account their worldview, the meaning that they have to themselves, and their vision for their role in our societies. Effective responses will therefore require not only increased capacity in each of our countries, but also continued engagement at regional and integral levels to exchange best practice with a view of strengthening relative legislative policy and strengthening framework so that we can develop a system which recognizes the complexity and diversity of returning and relocating foreign terrorists and their families.
The next speaker is Mr. Casido from Spain, followed by Mr. Hudson from the United States.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta. Me gustaría, en primer lugar, felicitar al presidente de la Comisión y reporter de este informe por el buen trabajo realizado, también a Lisa por la excelente defensa que ha realizado y, por último, a todos los miembros de la Comisión porque esta Comisión contra el Terrorismo ha hecho un trabajo muy intenso en el último año. Me gustaría destacar también que este informe pone de manifiesto varias cosas. En primer lugar, la voluntad común y firme que existe en esta Asamblea, yo diría que unánime en la lucha contra el terrorismo. En segundo lugar, la adopción de un lenguaje y un marco conceptual común que se ve muy reflejado en este texto e incluso valores compartidos y también estrategias que permiten abordar esta cuestión con un amplio consenso y fortaleciendo mecanismos de cooperación internacional. Me gustaría agradecer muy especialmente la referencia que se hace en el informe a la conferencia celebrada en Madrid sobre víctimas del terrorismo. Creo que las víctimas del terrorismo no solo merecen todo nuestro reconocimiento, sino que además constituyen un pilar muy importante de fortaleza moral en la lucha contra el terrorismo. Y por último, también me gustaría señalar que en esta cuestión concreta de los foreign fighters que aborda el documento, creo que el conjunto de países de la OSCE hemos tenido un éxito razonable. Esta era una amenaza muy grave tras los conflictos en Siria, en Irak y en otras zonas. Había un flujo de retorno de terroristas que habían actuado en estos conflictos muy importante y, sin embargo, creo que las políticas nacionales y los mecanismos de cooperación, entre los que se incluyen algunas de las propuestas que contiene este informe, nos han permitido que esa amenaza haya sido gestionada y que el nivel de atentados, incluso en el último año, en el área de la OSCE, haya disminuido. Por tanto, creo que hemos hecho un esfuerzo que merece la pena. Muchas gracias.
Mr. Hudson, and will be followed by Mr. Chubarov from Ukraine.
I thank the chair. Colleagues, I want to start by commending the chairman of the Ad Hoc Committee on Countering Terrorism, Makis Varidis, for his strong leadership in the committee and for preparing this excellent text we have before us. This supplementary item makes an important contribution to our ongoing work on countering terrorism, while recognizing the added value that this assembly can bring to this issue. Let me clearly say that I fully support this resolution and would urge my colleagues to vote for it without reservation. However, from my point of view, it conspicuously does not mention a crucial point our governments are grappling with as we sit here today in Luxembourg: the need for our countries to urgently take responsibility for those who have radicalized and engaged in violence, including going over to fight for ISIS in Syria and Iraq. Colleagues, we all know that foreign terrorist fighters are a serious threat to all nations and homelands. This generation of experienced FTFs is more dangerous than those of years past because of their numbers and capabilities. This is a difficult issue, particularly when it comes to the question of repatriation. To do nothing, however, and leave these foreign terrorist fighters and their families in their current conditions in Syria and Iraq is not an option. It is also a human rights concern. Children, for instance, should not be left in the dire conditions of detention camps. Colleagues, you have seen that I have intended to present an amendment on this issue for consideration. It's listed as Amendment 1 in the committee documents. However, before bringing my amendment to a larger audience, I very much want to consult with my colleagues on the ad hoc committee. We had a very good discussion yesterday, and while my colleagues recognize the urgency and relevance of this issue, our discussion revealed a wide range of views on the feasibility and effectiveness of proactive repatriation. Out of respect to these views and the experience and expertise of my colleagues, and in order to avoid distracting unnecessarily from what I believe is an excellent text, I intend to withdraw the amendment I have proposed. But I am pleased the members of the committee agreed that we should focus on this issue intently and make future recommendations to the Assembly. I'd also like to thank the 11 members who have co-sponsored this amendment. I hope that they will trust my judgment in withdrawing at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Mr. Vysotsky from Ukraine, followed by Mr. Georgiev from North Macedonia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. When we're speaking about foreign terrorist fighters, we often mean the fighters and terrorists from such kind of network systems as ISIS or other transnational groups. But I want to tell about the fighters that act as an agent of some authoritarian state. You know that Russia uses its foreign terrorist fighters, the military men and veterans that were involved in special forces inside Russia, as in fact state agents in the various regions of the world. We see Africa, and you can recall the episode of killing of 3 Russian journalists allegedly by the members of the private military company connected to Kremlin. You know the Syria situation when Wagner private military company operates in the name of Russia, and the situation in Donbass when some of the Russian military units are acting as some independent bodies, fully controlled by the FSB and other special agency of Russia. In fact, I have a very interesting book here. It's the book by Ukrainian volunteers. It's called the PMC Rush, Russian Private Military Companies. You can take it from me. Do you know that inside Wagner Group you have two heroes of the Russian Federations that were celebrated by Putin for this kind of operations. We see and we have the statistics about 11 Russian private military companies that are now acting in the state bodies to promote Russia influence in the whole world, and yes, and ask you to condemn this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Mr. Gyurchev, followed by Mr. Raja from Norway.
Thank you very much. I would like to support the work that was done in this field by the OSCPA and also the document that is put together. This issue, the issue of the foreign fighters, it's an issue that also is related to Macedonia, because in the last 6-7 years we do have the experience of foreign fighters. Mostly they've been traveling to Syria, some of them Iraq, and consequently, after some of them have returned to Macedonia, but not just to Macedonia, also to the region, then there is a security risk for our citizens, our societies, and our neighborhoods. Therefore, Macedonia adopted a law where this issue is addressed to law, and also there are legal consequences for the people that are involved in the fighting these wars and fighting and actually executing terrorism against innocent civilians abroad. And I would like to encourage the other countries here to do the same, because we need to internationally address this issue. The fact that recently we didn't have huge unfortunate events related to terrorism in Europe or North America, it doesn't mean that there are no individuals or organizations that are planning them. So we need to stay vigilant. We should not slip into the naiveness or relaxiveness of September 10th. Yes, there are individuals and organizations that are willing to harm our countries, harm our societies, and harm our communities. So once again, we've adopted a law that is addressing this particular issue of foreign fighters, and I would like to encourage other countries that have not done that to do that. So that is a good thing done in Macedonia, but also in the other countries of the Balkan region. Thank you very much.
Mr. Raja is the next speaker, followed by Ms. Kauma from Finland.
Yes, thank you. I will start by commending Mr. Chairman, who's not here with us today, but also the rest of the committee and the Secretariat for all the assistance we have gotten in the CCT committee. This is a great, I think this is a good resolution, and I hope this will pass, but this is only the beginning. The hard work remains. And just to give you some examples, we as a committee, we visited Bosnia-Herzegovina, and in the jail of Zenica, we actually encountered with some of the terrorist fighters who were sentenced there. And one of the terrorist fighters, he looked at the committee, and he knew I was Muslim, and he said, you guys are not, you're not Muslim, and I was infidel in his eyes, and he said, if he had the chance, all of us should be killed. That's what he said. He's sitting in jail. I don't think we should be naive about when they were getting out of jail if they will be rehabilitated. That's one example. We went to Paris to learn about the children who are returning. Based on the learnings, I raised the issue in Norway, in the parliament, in the media. Norway didn't have any stand on helping the children back. After 3-4 months of debate with the government, in the parliament, in the media, now Norway has a stand and we are helping the children back. So, of course, what the work we are doing here in OSCE, especially in the CCT committee, it actually matters. But in the long run, we need to do a lot to integrate Muslims in Europe. It comes to issues of freedom of expression, freedom of religion, the gender equality, to educate, but also we need to be aware of the discrimination that is in this society, the racism, all that we know, that the winds that are blowing over Europe. There's a lot of things to do. I think we need to remember two words from, one sentence from Gilles Capel, one of the famous scholars in France, who said, this is ongoing battle for the Muslim young hearts and minds, and we need to win the hearts and minds of the young Muslims in Europe. But we also need to keep in mind the words of Osama bin Laden, and I will end with that. And he said, we, like terrorists like him, but he said, we Muslims, that's what he said, but we Muslims love death as European and Westerns love life. With this in mind, we need to remember this is a good resolution. We should pass it, but this is only the beginning. The hard work remains. Thank you.
Next speaker is Ms. Kauma from Finland.
Madam President, dear colleagues, first of all, I would like to thank Makis Voridis and the whole ad hoc committee for their timely and relevant work on this supplementary item on terrorism. I would like to pay particular attention to one very serious and complex issue, namely the problem related to the wives and children of ISIS fighters. More than 70,000 women and children are still at the Al-Holi camp in eastern Syria. It is estimated that many of them are wives and family members of the ISIS fighters. What exactly has their role been in the planning, enabling, and execution of terrorist activities is difficult to say, but at least the wives have known, or they should have known, what ISIS is about and what kind of circumstances prevail in the places where they have decided to follow their husbands. All states have the right to decide who enters their territory. Therefore, governments are currently considering how to deal with these women and children. Repatriation requires rehabilitation and education. One thing is to consider if repatriation could be conditional, such that it would require the person to become informant in order to prevent future terrorist acts or to give information on those acts already committed. Agreeing to be under constant surveillance is a minimum requirement. But what happens after the repatriation is an issue that needs to be properly discussed also at the international level. We need to find answers to how to define guilt and how to try those who have been involved either actively or passively in the activities of ISIS. One alternative is to set up supranational trials or international criminal court. Ladies and gentlemen, according to statistics, returned foreign fighters have been increasingly involved in recent terrorist acts in Europe. Are we willing to take that risk? What is more important, the security and safety of our nationals or the respect for their human rights? Whose human rights are more important? Those who voluntarily have left their countries in support of the Islamic State, or those whose lives might be at risk if we repatriate radical terrorists?
Finish this committee meeting now. Thank you, everybody. The speakers list is over. We do not have time now to consider amendments for this supplementary item, but from tomorrow at 9 a.m. in the morning, we will move straight to the consideration of the amendments for this supplementary item, and then we will consider and debate 3 remaining supplementary items. Those who want to sign up as speakers for the remaining 3 supplementary items, please do so at the table office. Thank you and see you tomorrow at 9 a.m.